today we are looking at the brand new Studio Series Soundwave. Yeah. Also, I have a new tripod finally. My table's still pretty wobbly, so we'll see how this goes. It has a built-in light, so this is definitely going to be a little different, but we'll see how things go. All right, so yeah, here is the new Studio Series Soundwave from Transformers the movie with all of his bits and bobs. So right out the bat, I'm going to say this is an amazing figure. It's excellent. It's fantastic, and it pisses me off. This figure really pisses me off. I got a lot to say, and I think I am going to put that in a separate video. I have a rant built up in me about the state of Transformers collecting in general, just toy collecting in general, how things are going, and what I think and why this figure makes me so mad. But that's going to be a separate video because that's I got a lot to say. I got a lot to say about that. But for now, we're just going to look at this figure based on his own personal merits. So first and foremost, let's take a look here at the packaging right there. So you can see we got that nice artwork of Soundwave with Laserbeak and Ravage with tape sort of materializing out of his chest, which is clearly meant to be Buzzsaw since that's who he comes with. Down here on the side, we got that same little bit of artwork right there. Back of the box, we have the scene from Transformers the movie where he's launching the tapes. Come on, focus. There we go. With a little quick bio right there where he's launching his color changing tapes. So we get our CGI renders of everything that's in the box, warnings, all that good stuff. We got that same Autobot City view that we had in the Constructicons. A couple of things to note about this packaging though. So first and foremost, there is no Studio Series 86 markings on this packaging. It just says Studio Series Transformers the movie. I think that was the case with the Constructicons as well, but I don't remember, and I don't have those boxes anymore to verify that. But we do know that Studio Series 86 as a subline was going away and everything was just going to get merged into Studio Series. There was also rumors that the main lines were going to go away and get merged into Studio Series. Don't know if that's necessarily true, but after having this guy in hand, I kind of believe it. Now that is, of course, a video for another time. But for right now, let's get back to Soundwave. All right, so in the box, of course, he comes with all of this little bits and bobs and stuff, and there is some assembly required. And since the assembly all goes to the cassettes, we're going to start looking at the cassettes first. So for Ravage's little gun bits, you're going to take this little piece right here, which is his tail, and we get two of these little silver pieces. They're hollow on one side, but they are painted a nice silver, and they're tiny, and I just launched it just from the pressure from my fingers. So, they are tiny. Don't lose them. And you just plug those in like so, and like so. And as you can see, there is a 5mm peg right there. So much like what went on with the cassettes that came with Perceptor, you're basically creating a handheld option if you want to use that as a weapon for the robot. This can, however, also store on Soundwave, and we will show that off later on. For Buzzsaw and Laserbeak, as they do both come with the exact same accessories because they're ultimately the exact same figure, you get this little piece right here that plugs into the sides just like so, and that gives you a little rotating peg option right there, so that you can have this also be handheld. Now on to Ravage, and here's Ravage in his cassette mode. And this is shit. This is complete shit. I'm sorry. There's no other way to sugarcoat this. This is shit. And for comparison, here is the previous Ravage, which some people thought was shit as well. But I mean, you look at this cassette mode, look at this cassette mode, and you immediately can see that there's a stark difference between these two. When I first saw this, I thought that this was a retool of the Steel Jaw that was also kind of shit, but it's not. But it definitely does share some design inspiration. Okay, so for transformation, you're just going to pull these legs out here, pull these legs up and over here, do a whole rotation right there, and you can put these legs down, snap those together to form his big fat head because he's got a big fat head for some reason. Then rotate these around, and then you've got all of these joints here that kind of don't seem to serve any real purpose. The way he's got these tabs sitting right back here, they tab into these little slots on his shoulders, which puts him into that pose. And I think that is the intended pose because that's the final pose in the instructions. Yes, I did look at the instructions for this because this thing infuriated me so much. But he also has a joint right here. So you could do that if you wanted to, do that if you wanted to. I don't know why you would. His legs can only go back. They can't go forward. So utilizing these joints kind of seems weird and pointless. And you got that joint there. I mean, I guess technically, I guess you could if you did something like that and something like that. Maybe you could see him being a foot or something. Because he does have a peg hole back here. Nothing pegs in there, but he's got one. Every so often, you get a Transformers figure, and it seems like there was a different design intent than what ended up being the final product. Classics Galvatron is a prime example of that, and we even know that that was intended to be something else. Anyway, final step, of course, I didn't do this. You got to plug this into his butt, just like so, and it gives him this big thing on his butt, but does give him his tail, I guess. So here he is with his previous incarnation, or one of the previous incarnations, this of course being the Siege version. But yeah, this was not a great Ravage. This was not a great Ravage, but this was light years better than this is, and even more posable. I don't know what the idea was with this Ravage, but man, this is shit. And for another comparison, here he is with the G1 Ravage. Sadly, I no longer have the Classics Ravage. I feel like the Classics Ravage was probably the best tape version of Ravage that we've gotten. Sadly, he won't fit in Soundwave's cassette tape deck chest thingy, even if I was able to secure another one. And moving on to Laserbeak and Buzzsaw. Focus. There you go. And as you can see here, they are a gappy mess, but they are, still pretty decent little cassette bots. Now, of course, there's been a lot of discussion on these two guys as to why Buzzsaw was included when he was not in Transformers the movie instead of one of the other cassettes. Again, the only thing I can think of is because Buzzsaw was the tape that always came with Soundwave in the vintage packaging. Only in the reissues has he been coming with Laserbeak, which he's probably more identifiable with. Now, we do have the little sculpted tape spindles right here on this side. I kind of wish they were on this side because this side looks a little bit better, but then you also have holes here, which is kind of a shame. I imagine somebody's already working on gap fillers. Now, a lot of people like to call some of these modern studio series mini masterpieces, and I think this is a good example of that being correct because this is very much like a shrunken down version and slightly simplified version of the masterpiece version of Laserbeak. So for transformation, you just pop this around, hold that head down, then come down here, lift up the wings just like so, and flip down the feet, and flip back the wings, and then you take your little backpack piece, and there's two tiny little pegs right there. They're going to go in these tiny little holes right there. Not a super tight connection, but it's not a loose connection either. It'll still be easy to knock off, but yeah. And there we have our Laserbeak. And yeah, he's a good looking cartoony Laserbeak, even with the little bits of gaps and whatnot. And obviously, Buzzsaw is the exact same, as they are the exact same figure, just different colors. So there we have that. Now for articulation, you can kind of move the head up and down and a little bit back and forward, but only that far. You can't do the full straight down, which, you know, again, in the show, most of the time, that's how his head was, or their heads were. Also, much like Ravage, they do kind of have a fat head. Doesn't look quite as egregious, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, for comparison, here is Laserbeak with his previous incarnation. I do have the Toy Hacks Repro label set with the little added guns on this one. You can see how those look and scale with each other. And here is Buzzsaw with his previous incarnation. And our G1 Laserbeak. Sadly, I do not have a G1 Buzzsaw. You can see how those look together. So obviously the previous incarnation was more based off the toy, whereas this one is much more cartoon accurate. Now, I do have the Masterpiece versions. I don't want to pull them down and show them off because they're actually disintegrating. Yeah, the Masterpiece versions, where all the pin joints are going through, the black plastic is all just falling apart. So, yay for not aging very well. Hopefully these will do better. Now, on to Soundwave himself, but one thing we want to touch on real quick is that Soundwave does have these little fins here on the sides of his arms. And on the bottom of both Laserbeak and Buzzsaw, you have these little grooves right here in the feet. And those grooves will very loosely, I will say, clip onto that fin and give him a place to perch on Soundwave's arm, which is kind of neat. Likewise, if you have any of these guys transformed into their tape mode and in his chest, you do have peg holes here on the sides of his backpack where you can take their little pieces and rotate that peg, and you can plug these onto his back for storage there. Now, taking a closer look at Soundwave, yeah, they have in fact nailed this guy pretty well. See, he's got that nice cartoon head sculpt, the big chest window. If anything, I'd say the Decepticon symbol is kind of hard to pick out on there. Kind of wish that was done in a metallic paint so it would sort of pop a little bit more, but you know, when the light hits it, you can kind of see it there. It's got the yellow going around. The rim does not have the little paint right here on the tape deck like the previous Soundwave did. It does have the little yellow stripes. It's got his buttons, all the silver and blue and yellow you would expect from our boy Soundwave. Now, some of the sculpted detail is very interesting because you look at the way his legs are sculpted. Those are very much sculpted like the Masterpiece Soundwave, how he transforms with the little corner clip here on the side of the legs, which is not how Soundwave's legs were animated. So that's a very interesting design choice. And again, that's not from the original toy either. Just a quick comparison here. Getting ahead of ourselves, but just a quick comparison with the G1 Soundwave. You can see how his legs were actually sculpted. This is more about how they were actually animated. Now, going up the back of the figure, you can see he does actually have his on-off switch and his volume switch here. They're sculpted in, but they're not painted. And the interesting thing about this is that they're only here in robot mode. In his tape deck mode, they're inside the tape deck, so he doesn't actually have these on his tape deck mode, which is kind of a shame because kind of breaks the illusion, I guess you could say, a little bit. Going up here, he does have quite a bit of a backpack. It's a fairly accurate backpack, all things considered. A little bigger than it should be, but again, that's for transformation. And then, of course, you've got the actual tape deck buttons with their sculpted detail here on the back. You can have this sitting down if you want, or you can fold it up like that if you want. This way is a little bit more obvious from the front than this way, but they're both kind of obvious from the front. So articulation-wise, the head is on a ball joint. You don't get a whole lot of rotation there, but you do get a full 3D, full 360.
Yes, it's in 3D. Woo. Anyway, we do have universal pin joints here at the shoulders. They can go out up quite a bit. We do have a full 360 rotation there. We do also have a dedicated butterfly joint that snaps into there like that. You also have this joint from Transformation. So, if you wanted to, you could totally do a gang sign. I guess. Don't ask, I don't know. So we do have a 360 rotation at the bicep. We do have a double jointed elbow. This second joint, which is right here, is a little tight. It kind of snaps into place and you kind of have to unsnap it. We do have a rotation at the wrist, as well as opening and closing hands. The hands are sculpted in a very unique way, but they are sculpted where that index finger here is sticking out a little bit further. That way you can have Soundwave push his own buttons, literally playing himself. Take that how you will. I don't care. We have a waist swivel right here. We do also have universal hip joints, and you can see the buttons are on little flaps so they get up out of the way, so you can go forward that far. You can go back that far. You can go all the way out. I will say that his side-to-side movement here is a little not tight. Most of his joints are really tight, but the hips are ones that are not super tight going in and out. We do have a 90-degree knee bend. If you heard a snap, you can actually see one of my nitpicks with this figure. See how that knee is sticking out right there, and then that knee is not. These push out for robot mode and push in for tape deck mode, and it's very easy to accidentally just push them in when you're messing with it. Anyway, on to the feet. We do have ankle swivels, which again are a little more loose than I would like them to be. They're not like floppy loose, but they're very easy to knock and swivel. But then again, we also have ankle tilts, so we can get Soundwave into some pretty good, very Soundwave-ish poses, and yes, he can press his own button, as is expected these days of any Soundwave. Now, other than the cassettes, Soundwave's core accessories are his weapons / batteries. I know, big surprise. So they do come, both collapsed in like this. As you can see, this one actually has a little silver tip on it, and this one doesn't. Push on that silver tip. That lets you get a grip on his blaster, and you can pull that out. And then his Gatling gun, which they did pick out the missiles in paint. You can see that. Very nice. We just plug that into his shoulder, and this just flops on the table, and then you plug it into his hand. Get in there, get there. And once again, you can have Soundwave being all Soundwave and looking cool. Now here he is with his previous incarnation, the Siege / Netflix / Kingdom, Earthrise, whatever, Soundwave. Yeah, this one that I just recently got. As you can see, the new Soundwave is substantially bigger, which leads me to believe that, the rumors about them basically redoing all of our core Autobots and Decepticons in the Studio Series seems to be very, very well founded, because now their scale is not going to be correct. And so, yeah. Now, granted, this fixes a lot of my nitpicks about this figure. It does. But it does also get rid of his really great light piping that he had, because this guy has amazing light piping. Due to my lighting setup, you really can't see it here. It kind of looks like dead eyes, but he has great light piping, whereas this guy just has the painted eyes. So there is that. And we did have him out here already once before, but just for another comparison, here he is with his vintage counterpart. And yeah, he's almost the same size as the vintage one now. How about that? For a couple other comparisons, here he is with the Studio Series Megatron. So he is still smaller than Megatron slightly, which is about correct. And here he is with the Siege Starscream, or rather my custom painted Starscream. And yeah, now Starscream's too small, but we already know there's a new Starscream coming. So yeah, that'll be something I address in my rant video as well. Now, of course, as you saw, we do have the push button right here. It does open up the tape deck, and you can stick the cassettes in there. Big surprise, I know. I will say, however, given how much space there is here in his body, I think they could have engineered this to still have the room to hold 2 cassettes. I really do believe they could have done that, especially with how much backpack they already have here, because this whole piece is hollow. This whole piece is hollow, and from here to here, where that wall is also hollow. So yeah, they could have engineered this to hold at least 2 cassettes in his chest easily. Maybe that's something coming for the future. I kind of hope not. Now, likewise, you can also take your old cassettes, and they will fit in his chest too. So, if you want to ignore that this Ravage exists and use the previous Ravage, you can totally do that. Likewise, because they are the same size, you can take the new cassettes and fit them into your older Siege Soundwave. If that's something that you want to do, you can totally do that as well. All right, so for transformation, we're just going to leave Ravage in there because what the heck, why not? So we'll go ahead and collapse in and pop off his weapons here. Then we're going to come back here and we're going to open up these little side panels right here. They're very tight. And then undo this whole piece right here. You do have these little tabs right here that tab in like that. It's a pretty solid click. And we're just going to fold his head in. And this is what I was talking about before. You can see all of that's hollow. We got all of that's kind of hollow. There was room. There was absolutely room. All right. Then we're going to take his battery pieces, and these are going to plug in right back here. Now, if you notice, this one has these little fins right here, and this one doesn't. Why that is, I don't know. But these holes back here are key to include the fins. So, it doesn't matter which side you put it in, it'll fit on either side. Just tab that in and tab that in. And you can see he's got these little grooves right here, and the little tabs are right here, and those will tab in there just like so. Next, you take the hands, collapse them in, pull them out, pulling out this little piece, rotate them in, and then close it up, and then fold them back just like so on both sides. Then we are going to rotate at the waist all the way around. We're going to go ahead and lift up this flap and fold out these 2 side flaps, just like so. On the legs, you've got a panel right here, and you've got a panel right here. You're going to fold out. Now, this panel right here, again, has the on-off switch on there, which is very deceptive. It makes it seem like this should be, stay out like this, especially since it lines up flush with the rest of it, but it does not. It folds back in. So you're going to rotate the foot. It was like this. You're going to rotate the foot all the way around, lift up this little panel right there, and fold that foot in, and then close that panel back up. Do that to both sides. Then if you didn't already accidentally push these in, push them in. Then you're going to rotate the legs to the side 90 degrees. Then fold this up, just like so. Also, just to point out while I got this here, look at that. He's got gap fillers. He came pre-designed with gap fillers. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, then you're going to fold these up. And there's these little tabs right here that are going to go in the little slots in the side of his chest right there. Just like so. Then you're going to take this panel right here and snap it down into place. Rotate to the back. And then both of these arms right here, you've got these tabs should kind of find themselves automatically. There's a tab in there going into a slot right there in the back of the leg. And then you take this tab right here and it'll go right there into the side of the leg, just like so. And there you have him in his tape deck mode. And yeah, I mean, it's It's not any less convincing than the previous ones, but it's definitely not more convincing than the previous ones. I'll say that. Again, you can see we saw this on the backside of robot mode, but we got the buttons now with the sculpted details that say play, forward, stop, record, back, all that stuff. We do have the L and R for the speakers, but again, the fronts of his legs are now the sides of his legs of the tape deck instead of the inside, so we don't have the stuff that goes on the side here. That is what it is. Now here he is once again with his previous counterpart. As you can see, the tape deck mode is fairly similar in size, but as for the rest of it, as you can see, yeah, the illusion is fairly well broken as you rotate around. And obviously, if you own this guy and you paid attention to the transformation, you'd see that their transformation engineering is nearly identical. The steps are pretty much the same. And speaking of the original, here he is, of course, with the original Soundwave. Well, sort of original. This is the reissue that had the Sound Blaster tape deck integrated into it. But yeah, you can see that's how that looks there. So again, going back to this one clearly follows the toys design aesthetic a little bit more with where everything lines up and what details are picked out. Whereas this is more how he actually did look in the cartoon with the play buttons being a little bit lower. Now, much like in robot mode, you can, of course, store the weaponry on Soundwave's back here. If you so choose, just rotate those pegs around and you can stick those right back there into those peg holes, like so. You can also store Ravages back here. This is not official. This is something that I have discovered. So he has a groove down here that goes pretty deep in. You can actually take that tail and it will very snugly slide in there, just like so. And then you can lift this up and sort of push it forward to wedge it in there. And so now, yeah, you can store all of those. Now, sadly, you can't do anything with the cassettes officially. They don't tab in anywhere, but hey, there's enough room back here. You can just sort of stick them like that if you wanted to. Call that, storage. They're technically inside of him. That sounds so bad. So one other thing, of course, to go over is the definite change in sculpting design philosophy. So all of the sculpted detail that we're kind of used to seeing on these figures is toned down dramatically. There is a lot of sculpted detail. We pointed out the legs have a little bit of the masterpiece design with the little piece down here and the swivel piece right there and the corner clip right there. So it does still have a decent amount of sculpted detail. It just doesn't have all of this sculpted detail, which some genius somewhere decided is called greebling, and that's what everybody calls it. That's a terrible name. That's a terrible name. I have not disliked the greebling. A lot of people have. I think in some cases it's definitely gone overboard, depending on the type of plastic that they're using as well. But in some cases, it's very well founded. And this really did start with Transformers Siege. That was because, again, they were supposed to be their Cybertronian form, so they had more tech detail to sort of be more akin to the movie. And now a lot of people are praising Hasbro that they're going cleaner, getting rid of a lot of that greebling. I'm here to tell you that's being done for a completely different reason than you think it is. So the more of that little finite sculpted detail that you have on a figure, the more expensive it is to produce, because the more likely it is that your tolerances have to be higher and the more waste you're going to have from things that won't pass QC. And as such, yeah, the lack of sculpting or the reduced sculpting really is about cutting costs. Likewise, there's definitely a lot less paint apps than we're used to seeing. A lot of this is more cast in the respective colored plastics with minimal paint apps, but enough to get the job done. But yeah, so that's basically going to be it at my look on this guy. Again, he is an amazing figure. He's the best Soundwave that we've gotten outside of $1,000 self-transforming automatic robot Soundwave, um, which, you know, that's not in my wheelhouse, so that's not something I'm ever going to get. At least for now, for the next few months before something else comes along. We'll talk about that in my rant a little bit, I think. But yeah, that's basically going to be it for my look at this guy. I think he is an amazing figure. He is at the new price. I was able to pick him up a little bit cheaper due to the holiday sales going on everywhere. I picked him up at Walmart, if you didn't see that short. But yeah, I do think he's cool. He just pisses me off that he even exists in the first place. Again, we'll touch on that in the rant video. But for now, that's going to be it for me, guys. Y'all have a good one.